It happened years ago, in a forgotten town where history was written in shadows, where every street seemed to echo the memory of lives that had long since vanished. The buildings leaned with age, their facades scarred by time, their windows like blind keys, watching anyone who dared to walk through. At the very edge of that town, beyond a narrow dirt road tangled with weeds, stood the Monastery. The place had been abandoned since the late 1800s, though abandoned never felt like the right word. Its walls were cracked, weathered by storms and earthquakes, yet there was something unnervingly alive about them. The air around the monastery always seemed colder, as if the stone itself exhaled a chill that seeped beneath the skin. Locals avoided it completely, and when pressed, they would only shake their heads, muttering warnings too vague to ignore, but never detailed enough to satisfy curiosity. Stories swirled in hushed tones at the tavern, secret rituals carried out by monks who had long ceased to be holy, unexplained disappearances of villagers who wandered too close, voices that drifted from its corridors when the wind howled at night. Some swore they had seen shadows moving behind its shattered windows. Others claimed they heard bells toll at midnight, though the tower had no bell. I was drawn there not by bravery, but by something far more dangerous: the hunger to know. It wasn't enough to live within the safe borders of what everyone accepted as truth. I needed proof. Something that would make sense of the gnawing emptiness inside me. The monastery promised what ordinary life could not. Mystery, danger, perhaps even revelation. The first time I crossed the threshold, the silence was suffocating. It wasn't the silence of emptiness, but the kind that feels deliberate, as though the building itself was holding its breath, listening. My footsteps echoed, unnaturally loud, bouncing off cracked walls lined with faint murals, their paint faded to ghostly outlines of saints who seemed to avert their eyes. Dust floated in thick beams of light, breaking through holes in the roof, and each particle moved so slowly it felt like time itself hesitated inside those walls. It was there, in a corner, half hidden beneath collapsed wood and stone, that I found the journal. Its cover was brittle, the leather flaking to the touch, but the pages were intact, almost untouched by time, as if protected. The handwriting inside was jagged, frantic, written by someone who had not intended their words to be read aloud. It told of a pact, not bound by signatures of ink or blood, but by intention itself. Words that, once spoken, sealed a promise between the desperate and the unseen. The more I read, the more I realized this was not just a story of the monastery's past. It was an instruction, a warning, and perhaps an invitation. The writer spoke of those who came seeking knowledge, who whispered their vows into the silence, and who received answers they should never have pursued. They did not ask for gold or eternal life. They asked for clarity, for power over the uncertainty of existence. And in return, something followed them back into the world. That was the moment I should have stopped reading, but the silence in that place seemed to lean closer, pressing me to continue. And in that silence, I made a choice that still marks me to this day. I should have left the journal where I found it, but the words on its pages gripped me with a weight I could not resist. Each line seemed written for the desperate, for those who longed for something more than the ordinary rhythm of life. The ink, though faded, carried a strange urgency, as if the author had been rushing to capture every thought before the courage, or perhaps the strength, escaped him. I remember the night I returned to the monastery with a lantern and that journal in my hands. The air outside was still, and the sky above was clouded, leaving the path cloaked in shadows. Every step I took felt heavy, as though the earth itself warned me to turn back. Yet I pressed on, convinced that what I would find inside was meant for me. When I crossed the threshold again, the silence welcomed me like an old companion. I walked to the center of the ruined chapel where broken pews lay scattered, their wood darkened by time. The journal trembled in my hands as I opened it to the page that had burned itself into my memory. The words weren't written as a prayer, nor as a spell. They were a declaration, a statement of surrender from one soul to something greater, something unseen. Against all reason, I whispered them aloud. At first, nothing happened. The lantern flickered, its flame bowing as though a breeze had passed through, though the air was perfectly still. Then slowly, the atmosphere thickened. The silence changed. It was no longer the absence of sound, but the presence of listening. The temperature dropped, and with it came a sensation I will never forget. The feeling of being observed by something vast and patient. I could not see it, but I knew it was there, in the spaces between the shadows, in the breath I drew, and the beat of my heart. That night, I dreamt for the first time of the voice. It did not shout or command. It whispered with calm precision, promising clarity, not power, not fortune. It offered to reveal truths I had buried for years, to lift the veil on the questions that haunted me since childhood. When I awoke, I carried with me an understanding I had not asked for, and a burden I could not share. The pact was not carved in stone, nor sealed in blood. It was sealed in the moment I chose to listen, the moment I allowed the silence of that place to speak back. And from that night forward, I was no longer alone. In the weeks that followed, I tried to convince myself it had all been in my imagination, a dream, nothing more. But then the patterns began. I would wake at the same hour each night, my chest tight, my ears straining to hear what I could not explain. Some nights it was the creak of a floorboard, though no one else lived with me. Other nights it was softer, a faint rhythm, as though someone were breathing in the corner of my room. I was not the only one. Word spread quietly through the town, not in the open, but whispered in fragments to those willing to listen. I learned of a woman who had once worked as caretaker of the monastery grounds. She confessed that decades earlier, she too had discovered the journal. She said she had read only a few lines before stopping, terrified by the way the words seemed to echo in her own thoughts. Her husband vanished soon after, walking out of their home one night without shoes, without reason, never to be seen again. Another man, older now and living on the far edge of town, told me he had dared to enter the monastery in his youth. He laughed when he spoke at first, but his hands trembled too much to hide. He described waking for months at the exact same hour as I did, always with the same sensation. Someone standing over him, watching, waiting. He swore that after those nights, he began to dream of places he had never been, of voices speaking his name in rooms that did not exist. Every testimony carried the same thread. None of them had asked for wealth or strength or eternal life. All they had sought was clarity, answers to the questions that kept them awake at night. And every one of them paid a price they never expected. The more I listened, the more I realized the pact was not meant to give. It was meant to take. to hollow out the space inside a person and fill it with something that did not belong to them. Even now, when I close my eyes, I hear the echoes of those voices like fragments of a language just beyond my understanding. Some call it suggestion, others claim it is nothing but fear. But I know the truth. The Pact was never about knowledge, it was about surrender. And once you give that part of yourself away, you cannot take it back. Even years later, the memory of that night in the monastery still clings to me, thick and unyielding, like smoke that refuses to dissipate. I cannot enter a quiet room without sensing it, the weight of unseen eyes pressing against my shoulders, subtle but undeniable. Sometimes, when the wind howls outside, I swear I can hear whispers that belong neither to this world nor to my own imagination. Words I cannot understand, yet they echo in my mind as if carrying their own insistence, their own will. I have tried to live a normal life, to bury the experience beneath routine and distractions, but nothing is ordinary anymore. Shadows linger too long in corners. Sounds arrive too early or too late. Reflections in mirrors occasionally shift for the briefest moment before settling back into what seems familiar. But I know the subtle wrongness that precedes it, and in that wrongness, I feel the Pact waiting. I have met others who brushed against the edges of the monastery's secrets, though none dared speak their experiences aloud. They speak of moments where time stutters, clocks that halt, breaths that catch mid-air, the faint impression that someone or something is following them, always just behind, just out of reach. The journal has a reputation, though few admit to seeking it. They call it cursed, dangerous, a warning disguised as paper, but the truth is more insidious. The Pact does not manifest as fear alone. It grows slowly, methodically, in the quiet spaces of your life. It teaches patience. It waits for curiosity to overcome caution. It does not rush. And once it is acknowledged, once it is heard and felt, it becomes part of you. Not visible, not tangible, but undeniable. Sometimes late at night, I hear it breathing, not in the room, but in the spaces between my thoughts. I feel it in the rhythm of my own heartbeat, in the small decisions that no longer feel entirely my own. And yet, it never demands, it never forces, it simply observes and waits for the right moment, knowing that human curiosity is unstoppable. I often ask myself whether the choice I made, whispering the words from the journal, was an act of bravery or foolishness. But the answer eludes me. Perhaps it is both. Perhaps it was exactly what it wanted me to think. I do not know if the Pact has grown stronger because of me, or if I have simply learned to sense it more clearly. But I know that it still exists, patient, watching, waiting for someone else to cross the threshold, to open the journal, to speak the words aloud. And maybe, just maybe, it will call to you too. Will you answer if it whispers your name?